Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, wherever you're at. My name is Lisa O'Brien, and I'll be your host today. Welcome back for our fifth edition of our second season of our Get a Grip webinar series. We have another webinar this month, and I invited two speakers to join us for a conversational style format. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to introduce our topic today, which is Robot Relay, how ARMs and AMRs team up for smart automation. We'll focus our discussion around collaboration between technologies and people, integration and orchestration of automation systems, and real-world impact and future of smart automation. So a couple notes before we get started. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end. And also, today's presentation will be recorded. We'll send a follow-up email with the link to recording. Please join me in welcoming our guests. We've got John Crimmins, Senior Solutions Architect with PlusOne, and Ryan Lillibridge, VP with Mission Design and Automation. Advance here so you guys can see what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves, and Ryan, I'd like to start off with you. So if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Mission for those of us that don't know you or have met you yet.
Yeah, happy to. Glad to be on. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm a husband and I'm a dad of 3 boys. So I've been doing that for 15 to 13 years now. That's my main occupation, keeps me pretty busy. And outside of that, I work in automation. I've been working in automation about 20 years within automation across multiple different facets. I've seen everything from lettuce to beef jerky to parcels and packages and warehouses and military to automotive. So lots of different applications, whether it be from traditional arms, cobot arms, vision pick, scan, AMRs, AGVs, AGCs. Over 20 years, had a lot of exposure to a number of different applications, and that's what keeps me coming back every day. Is there's something new and exciting and a new problem to solve every day. So engineering background, formerly trained as an engineer, found myself into sales because I maybe talk and listen too much, I guess, but glad to be here.
Nice. Thanks, Ryan. John, over to you. I'll give you a minute or two, please.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. I'm John Crimmins. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at PlusOne. I also added a new role to my life 3 months ago when my wife and I had our first child. So I'm a little behind you there, Ryan, but yeah, talk about, main jobs and your normal jobs in real life, right? I've spent 12 years in the industry here, mainly focused on warehouse automation. So really happy to have you on to talk a lot about all the, AMRs and the areas really where, I definitely don't know near as much about. And the past 5 years have really focused on looking at vision applications and AI vision specifically in the warehouse environment. And, that's what I do every day at PlusOne is kind of help our sales team out to really look at what are the proper applications for, PlusOne's technology in the warehouse environments and more.
It's going to be good.
Thanks, guys. Cool. And congrats on all the boys. So John also has another boy.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Before we get into the QA part of our discussion, I'd like to show the audience a short video to provide some context for today's discussion. Let me advance this for you. Where's my video at? All right, well, all right, I'm gonna have to pull this up for you. I think we can get started and I'll find it during our discussion and pull it up. Well, that's disappointing. I'm sorry about that, everybody. So it was a demo with Locust that we did some time back, and the Locust robot, if you're familiar with those, has some shelves and then some parcels on it. And so the Locust would come up to the robotic arm, and then the arm would pull off the parcels and then put them on a sorter afterwards. So, but I'll find that here before the end of our discussion. So
it's really a great conversation. Great lead into interoperability across systems and platforms, right? As teams and videos and PowerPoints, and man, still working on this stuff, right?
Yes.
Just like warehouse automation.
Yeah.
Yes, seamless, guys. We'll always need a person. AI won't solve all our problems. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. John was with us last month, so welcome back again. I'm going to start with you, John. So we hear a lot about islands of automation. For someone new to automation, can you share what that means in practice and how vision-guided robotic arms and AMRs are bridging those islands?
Sure. I always think of an island of automation similar to the area of a warehouse you're trying to automate. So the example is we see a lot of applications that specifically focus on one thing in a warehouse. So trailer unloading or receiving dock or storage or sortation, things like that. And those are really islands of automation. And you mentioned, how robots and AMRs, are interplay within those islands. To me, I almost always see robots as part of the island. So they're solving a problem either in the trailer, doing fulfillment of some type, doing some packaging of some type. And then AMRs normally are going to be connecting those islands with the whole goal that, you're going to try to not just automate one piece of your warehouse, but you're trying to automate multiple pieces of that and make everything more efficient.
Yeah.
Yes. And then Ryan, I just wanted to give you a chance to see if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, happy to. I like what John said. I think often what you do with a team of lean engineers as you're going through an industrial plant or a warehouse, you're looking for your bottlenecks, right? You're trying to find those spots that are holdups, that you see a lot of hangups or quality issues or pass-through issues. That's my bottleneck. Let's solve that. So we're going to build an island there that starts to solve that issue right there. Maybe even not even considering what's happening in another part of the building on a different island. That's someone else's gig, right? So then someone else over there finds their bottleneck and builds an island. And it just so happens that we need to do international trade between all these different islands. So as we get those shipping lanes figured out within the facility, how do we do that well? AMRs are really that transport device between the islands. And maybe there's some handoffs they need to do, or one island's going to package something up correctly to go to the next island so it can be received better. So I really think John's on point where you do start to solve those different islands. And as you do that, those bottlenecks start to move to, oh man, transportation's starts to become my issue. So where do I put a channel or a canal or something to increase that workflow and move things more effectively between each of those islands?
Yeah, and I know we're going to get into this later on, but I'm really kind of interested to hear, your opinion on, connecting those because, at Plus One, we really solve for a couple of applications and kind of solving like our local, small island there. But you guys focus on really the entire warehouse. So really excited to get into kind of how you guys have solved things for different applications and different building types.
Yeah, same.
Nice. Ryan, I'm going to stick with you. There's often talk about automation or we get this question a lot with replacing people. How do you frame the relationship between humans, robotic arms, and AMRs when you talk with customers?
Yeah, it's a good question, Lisa. I think there's a perception around it, right? That automation is there to replace jobs. What I've often seen is many of these places can't get enough people to staff the entire location. So what you're looking at is trying to really bring the whole team up a level. Can I put automation in places that allows my team to work on more important tasks where I need their minds and they can bring more value in that way? I heard a great leader say one time, you have the 4 Ds, dull, dirty, dangerous, and degrading. So thank you, Mr. Nieves, for that pointer. But I think you're looking for those, right? How do you find those places where you can lift up that human spirit, make people come into work and be excited to come to work. And now I'm not destacking or depalletizing boxes from a 8-foot reach down every day. I'm doing value add on the label side of things, or I'm solving harder problems, or I'm actually tending to the robot cell and I'm learning programming as well. So I think there's a lot of value that can come into that for recruiting. There's value that comes in through production. And often I'm rarely seeing people want to do that replacement because they're looking for staffing to handle some of those tougher problems. And they can't allocate those to the tougher problems sometimes if they don't automate. So I don't know what you think, John, on that.
No, I was actually kind of curious from your experience of automating, multiple islands, the jobs that folks do, beforehand and afterhand, what have you kind of seen change? I know for us, we've kind of seen folks go from, instead of doing like literal induction, now they're managing like 2 or 3 robot cells in an area. But for you, when you guys are kind of doing multiple spots in the warehouse, how do those folks' jobs change kind of throughout the whole building?
Sure. I think they often move to more value add things on the island per se. depends how much automation ends up in that location,
Sure.
or they end up in another value add place within the facility. So they're moving to those tasks. If it's not the depalletizing side of things,
Mhm.
it's helping figure out where those shipping lanes need to be for the AMR process to be put in place. So they're helping to solve those next issues that come up as they continue to grow.
Yeah, and I actually really liked what you said before about using folks' brains, because then these challenges are not just, a pure like, all right, how fast can I do it? It's now more of a strategy and, how, really challenging the mind as opposed to the body to kind of solve these things, which I think is a more fulfilling task in the warehouse environment.
Yeah, and I think what we see too is, you have the brownfield installations, and there's already some monuments or there's items in place that you need to work through and work around. And those can be challenging if you don't have input from the right people on the team and the right players to start helping to solve those, because you're using them over here. As you free them up, they can help you mitigate or solve those other areas. Now, greenfield, you get to start a little bit fresher, and you kind of zoom out 30,000 feet, look at the whole facility, and walk through those handoffs from start to finish. So a little bit different approach on both. But as you know, in warehousing, you typically have peak season or blackout season where every effort needs to go through packages moving through the facility. And then you get a window of time to make adjustments, maybe from, I don't know, February to September. It seems like it kind of keeps shrinking over time here as people are ordering more and more. So those teams can help you work in those windows of time that you have for improvement.
We could probably have an entire conversation on automating during peak versus non-peak. So yeah, maybe that's another future topic, in February after everybody's done, Lisa.
Yeah. How do you scale from
1,000
people to 3,000 people for a number of months, right? And is that manageable or feasible, right? So
I think that it's a lot of this is just selling, in the brownfield scenarios, it's selling the operators on the floor that, hey, we aren't coming after your jobs. Like, this is what's going to happen. It is going to it's a new tool to make your life easier at the end of the day. Okay, John, how does the PickOne platform help ARMs see and adapt in dynamic environments?
Sure. I mean, the beauty of, a vision system generally is just being able to identify and act as the eyes of what a person normally is. Those systems have changed over time, right? So, I'll call it more basic ones. You can easily take like a single SKU pallet and, unload all the items on there or off of there. And, that doesn't require any type of intelligence. I think where +1 and AI vision comes in specifically is when you're trying to add a little more nuance to that. So, one of the examples we see a lot is when you have like a chip box on top and it's very, very crisp and clean. And when you have two flaps, like, are those flaps, not only different boxes, or, are they a border between two boxes, right? And so it's basically having that nuance and intelligence to look between those versus a crease between boxes. And so when you say, how help you see, right? It helps you really see, determine different scenarios in the warehouse environment that, folks kind of normally do today. One of the other ones that we get a lot is looking at, a pallet and trying to determine, is an item a pallet, which you would think is a pretty non-trivial task. But what happens when that pallet has a barcode on it accidentally? Does a vision system look at that as now an item? And the same thing applies to a slip sheet as well. And so it's all these little nuances in the process that, vision systems of yore, right, might not be able to solve that. But with, kind of all the data processing and intelligence that a system like PickOne has, we can kind of handle all those on the fly and, deal with items as it goes. And one of the benefits, of course, of, AI vision technology is not just the fact that, it's good now, but it keeps learning as time goes on. So to me, that's kind of what the benefit is. It really is the literal thing you need in dynamic environments, right? If it's, if your environment is not dynamic, then you don't need a very fancy vision system. You can just use something that's been used for, 10 plus years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you get pallets with labels on them? I thought they came with labels standard within the warehouse environment. Multiple labels all over, kind of.
Yeah, I think one of our favorite things is looking at, we have a service called Yonder, which is human in the loop. So, for 99% of all picks, they happen robotically, nothing, really, there's no intervention needed. Occasionally, we have a person in the loop that gets sent an image to say, all right, how do we deal with this? So those are kind of what I'm referring to, where we get things in our, pick scene there where you have like a box next to a shoe, right? And normally you don't pick shoes, you pick a box of shoes. And so the question is, well, what do? Do you pick a box with half a shoe in it and send that to a customer? Or do you say, hey, something's wrong here, send it to a person, and then they kind of help identify that error in the process? So, to me, it's like, it's one of those things where you need, not just a vision technology, but this person kind of involved in the process to make sure everything works well, to make sure you have all the errors covered.
Yeah, and with Yonder, that keeps improving the system as well, right? So
Mhm.
those decisions that
Yeah.
are hard to
Mhm.
make, someone makes that call, and then the system gets better over time, right? So
Yeah, and I would even say that it's not only getting better for some stuff, but it's also what not to train on, right? So
mm,
the example of like this shoe out of the box, we don't want to use that as image training data to say, all right, let's learn what a shoe is, right? We don't necessarily care what shoes because you don't really each pick shoes that often. At least, from my experience, you're picking boxes of shoes, not shoes themselves.
yeah.
So it's a yes and no there.
If anyone on the call wants to each pick shoes, I'm sure we talk about it though.
Yeah.
Ryan, so mission design and automation works on integration every day. What's working or not working when it comes to unifying those systems through common data or control frameworks?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lisa. And I think off of, trying to get a video to play on Teams, COVID really stimulated the virtual meeting, online meeting platform. But I think multiple calls a day, I still struggle with. I watch people struggle with getting connected to the TV or getting this connected to that. And these are consumer devices that the connectivity is at a much higher level of adoptance and often works really well. You don't think about how easy it is to sometimes set up a new router in your home, or you put in the Nest thermostat and somehow it ties in. And some of those things that your phone ties to very quickly within your home that you set down and through Bluetooth they connect, um, works relatively smoothly. I would say the industrial automation system has a ways to go to get to that. So those conversations and communication between all those devices, different platforms created by different companies that don't really have an interoperability standard set up for a lot of these things. It takes an integrator to get all that communication to go well together. So what's working well for us is having those conversations early, understanding the frameworks that are existing, if they are existing. If they're not existing, we're going to want to talk about what are you looking for from a connectivity standpoint. So I think that's important to look at. And if we go through this and we start to identify what information do you need and which island, what information from the island needs to go to the next island, what information from the island needs to go to an AMR so it can properly transfer something, we start talking about that software architecture and what that looks like. There's different platforms where you may want the machine to call the device to it when it's ready. And then there's other ones where perhaps you want an individual to call it when they need it. So it's not every time that it's going to show up. The machine's not going to call it automatically. It's going to be someone that's at that location noticing that they need another AMR call or they need another pallet to come in, and they're going to call that pallet. So depending on what the structure looks like for each of those systems, we can set up different interfaces or different methods of fleet management through that process. Or perhaps you want the +1 vision system to detect as it's halfway through process, and the rest of that pallet needs to go somewhere else after we've reached this layer, and that signal is going to come out of that system. I mean, we're talking about touch panels, databases, PCs, cameras, PLCs, all tying into cloud services, going through OPC UAs, REST API, like it goes on and on. MESs, ERPs, like the connectivity of things that you can have talk, if you want to have talk, is very immense. So having an expert that can help understand that and make decisions on what data is useful where,
Mhm.
or if I've got multiple warehouses, I'm trying to look at a OE or capacity across my full network. Okay, I need this information to roll up from the edge all the way to those, or I just want to manage that locally within the island, are all different conversations. But if we start talking early, we get experts involved and talk through what are your goals, what information is valuable to you, what maybe is future state information that you may want but don't need right now. We found that to be very helpful to start that dialogue early and use some of the frameworks that we've developed over time to guide that conversation, because it can be a very insurmountable task if you're trying to look at it all and do everything all at once.
Ryan, quick question for you. You kind of mentioned essentially having, AMRs not only be like a fleet managed, but also sometimes folks controlling, an AMR mission,
Mm-hmm.
For your kind of when the projects that you've worked on either recently or over time, what kind of determines for folks that, for an operation, they want to have more like individual human control of those, right? Or maybe, they're kind of managing the fleet themselves versus the fleet is automatically managed. Where do you kind of see that tipping point for folks in the industry?
Yeah, it's I've been in automation long enough to know that the right answer is it depends.
Yeah.
And that's the answer every
Yeah.
time. So it depends on the system. We have ones that are, moving between a few conveyors, and that's what they're going to do all the time. Some people want AMRs in that situation. Sometimes the right answer is an AGV that follows tape or an AGC that follows tape on the floor because the route is the same. So, and the machines will call that, or it's on a time basis where it's going to show up and we're going to transfer a load and we're going to move on. Other ones are more AMR. Hey, we're trying to navigate a brownfield. There's going to be obstacles in the way. We want some routing figured out. And then I think you were asking a little bit too about the interface process and what is it? Are the AMRs just showing up and connecting to the machine and taking things away, and the operator doesn't really have visibility to why or when, but it's being managed in the background? Or is it such that we have tablet and user interface that we've used for other ones that tie into the fleet management software? So on this user interface, we use language that makes sense to the people in the facility. Maybe it's location ABXYZ doesn't mean anything to that person, but the entire plant calls that press 4.
Okay.
Or location 5, dock 6, right? There's terminology within a facility that users know, and they talk in that language. And often your fleet managers aren't sharing that same language. So do you want another layer on top of that to increase adoption and user friendliness for your operators, or do you want that in the background managed? And then there's other things when in automation manufacturing, when things don't work like they're supposed to, right? How do we recover? What do those things look like? How do I move an AMR out of my high-low lane if it's in a spot like that? So all those different air recovery things come in the conversation as well. And I think it depends. But we have the team that we can talk about each one of those scenarios you're running into, or the brownfield or greenfield. So
and even throwing back to our earlier comments, it's like talk about new jobs for people. It's like being the interpreter maybe sometimes of robot language versus language that we experience in the actual facility, right? Because again, some of the times that language doesn't exactly matter up. Or again, solving the problem of, hey, why did this AMR just stop in the middle of the aisle, right? What's going on there?
Yeah. So and I think that leads to kind of another point of the AMRs that go between islands may not be the same ones that work on the different things within automation. Within that cell, you're doing AMRs instead of conveyors to move workloads in there, but you're consolidating into a larger transport that's running a main lane across the facility to the next island for processing. So maybe I want to batch those and run them on the highway where I've got local streets running through the smaller automation. So distinguishing when and where those boundaries are and what that looks like from a cost standpoint, to maybe have some smaller AMRs doing work here, and then I'm in a bulk load because I've got a long transport going there, or I want to manage my runtime through each system, and how do I connect those two together, and how do they communicate? Those are all conversations we have often.
Yeah. Another giant topic is essentially relating to street network to warehouse networks. It's like I started in 2013, and the amount of times people refer to now I get it. So
yeah.
Sorry, Lisa, I'm sure we lost track there for you.
No, actually, you ended up asking my next question for John. So I'm sorry, for Ryan.
Yeah.
But John, how does machine vision and perception data play into workflow optimization in these systems in your experience?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're dealing with today is when you integrate AMRs into, like we do a lot of DPAL today. A lot of DPAL systems, especially if you're kind of manually bringing the item up, they need like a way to either verify or indicate that the pallet is, secured. It's not going to create a danger to somebody else that's in the environment. One thing we're doing with Vision today is instead of having like a mechanical switch to ensure that a pallet is present, we can now, when an AMR drops something off, that communication is told to probably the local cell PLC, and then we can confirm via the vision just saying there is a pallet present, there are items present, we're going to start our work. And so we talk about like optimizations. It's honestly less hardware involved in it. I think it's becoming easier to program because instead of having to have all these different switches and signals via PLC logic, you can now rely on bring an item into the robotic cell, request a message from +1 that something exists, and we can now continue to do that work. So I think some of the software optimization becomes easier, and you kind of save some of the costs in the mechanical piece of it. So that's kind of how I see vision really helping that process. And the other thing that I'll just kind of add in there too is it's also possible that when a pallet comes into the area, one of the things that we have dealt with before is if there's like a banded pallet, or let's say there's stretch wrap on it still. This is again where we involve that human in the loop, or even sometimes our vision system recognizes this and we say, hey, there's no eligible items to pick on this pallet. We kind of throw up the stack light to a yellow or red to say, hey, there's something going on here. And again, it's another one of those, going back to earlier conversations, an example of where a person can get involved in this to say, how do we solve this problem to kind of enable these systems to work? So again, things do work pretty well, but again, as Ryan kind of keep mentioning at the beginning, it's like, we've been working with technology for so many years and we can't even get videos to play on, webinars sometimes. So yeah, it's, and this is of course not to, bash you or anything like that, Lisa, but it's like, we've all had that experience and we're like, well, no sound in this PowerPoint video, here it goes. So that's kind of where I see AI vision is, it helps out a lot of the problems there and then allows people to kind of use their brain to kind of solve more on different tasks in the environment.
Yeah.
This is all part of the plan, everybody.
Yeah.
You did that very
good
well.
job.
That's another point, John, too, on the vision system, right? Often, traditionally, if you're using a lot of conveyance for pallet transfer, we're going to push or crowd or move or try to get pallets into the same location. But if we're using AMRs, AGVs, those kind of systems, there's a level of accuracy you can expect with those, within an inch or so, forward, aft, and you kind of where you can kind of set that pallet. In which that point, if we want to start to crowd and push and shove with heavier hard automation, it does become more complex. Where if we have vision that can adapt to that shift, of where we can set something, or we can set in multiple locations. If we can come down and set multiple locations, you have a working location or 2 or 3 working locations, we can be transferring and moving loads while the robot is still working on another load to keep that utilization of the pick system very high, right? So those are different things that I see being very helpful with the vision system, right?
Yeah, and maybe the corollary here is just saying, things used to be very fixed, right? AMRs make them not as fixed, but vision systems were still pretty fixed. You had to be under this area within this box, but with an advanced, AI vision system, again, you can have more room for error in that process. So again, it's kind of, really enabling the warehouse to be more flexible overall, and whether it's the island of automation or the full system that's happening there.
Yeah, like you said, you got the gaps in between the boxes, you got the tape seams, you got a lot of things to sort out. You have only so many vacuum cups on your end of arm, and you got to land them on the box correctly to make sure that you can pick the full weight of the box. So absorbing that AMR inaccuracy and then determining those things is critical to making the system work, right?
Yeah, and I know the one thing that I'm sure you guys have worked on and have horror stories for, but is when you design a cell, that the robot arm can hit something on one edge or the other. So you got to make sure you kind of design for that full breadth of where the arm can be moving, and especially that gripper head as well. I know for us, one thing that we always try and do for any type of palletizing or depalletizing project is when we're grabbing an item, if we see 2 items and the gripper's too big for it, we try and offset that. But that's only if, there's room to kind of, for that cell. But kind of going back to the AMR piece of that, if we were using AMRs to kind of move into a safety area, you might not need as many, physical fencing barriers. So therefore it kind of eliminates some of those errors that happen with the physical movement of robots. So again, to me, like all these 2 pieces, the arms and AMRs really help make the warehouse more flexible. And again, it kind of, helps folks to kind of do critical problem solving in the warehouse.
Yeah, that's a good point on the end of arm tool too. I mean, any system we do with the robotics will run through a full safety risk assessment for the A3 process, and everyone will have that, but you have to consider what portions of the end of arm tool do you want to reach where, and what overlaps are there, and how do you arrange your guarding for reach purposes, and where can I grab in the stack? Also, if I have different levels in the stack, I've got to maybe come in and pick this one first or second. So end of arm tool design through that process, along with the cell safety and then footprint constraints, all becomes talking points.
Yeah, which is why we have, you all are partners. So thanks again for all of your help.
Yeah.
So, well, going off of that, Ryan, in your experience, how has solving for islands of automation changed over the years?
Yeah, it's sometimes I still see what it has been in the past, where you are within that island, and that's the right place to be, right? there's times where you need to solve that. I do see a lot more interest in automation over the years. I do want to say also that I think there's a better perspective on automation within the industry. I think people are more educated. There's students coming out of school now with first robotics and robotics classes and manufacturing practices along with software as well, where they're starting, we have the user base really understands some of the automation, and that's helpful when you're in a greenfield conversation, starting to talk through lean workflows, trafficking, what's this look like? How do we set this up? And then what do we look like on deployments and those kind of things? So what I see often is a little bit bigger picture conversation of, yeah, we know if it works over here, we want to duplicate that multiple times because we're solving this problem once, but the problem repeats over and over again. So we want 5 islands in 2 different countries, and we're going to put that across. So we have conversations around, well, what's that deployment look like? How do we shrink your installation time? What's your disruption into your daily workflow? When do we work within peak or out of peak? So we can look at those scaling factors. Number of customers want to talk about that as well. So that's where I see kind of that shift happening, is people getting a better understanding of it and also the capabilities of it. So I'll say there's hype cycles to every technology.
Sure.
3D picking over the last 20 years, I want to say every 3 to 5 years we look at it. And up until a number of maybe 5 to 8 years ago, I wouldn't recommend it to too many customers. The level of confidence I have now would be, I would recommend it. It works very well. So I think we've moved through the hype cycle on this. AMRs are coming through their hype cycle. I think there's room on some fleet management stuff that they'll progress through. And we'll see some adjustments there as well. But I do think AMRs are a useful tool in the right place when correctly applied. And the conversation around those often is at AGV, AGC, AMR, what's the right tool for your process? And how do you make that full system work together? And that's where we can help when we work together on stuff like that.
Have you guys seen, because obviously you've been around long enough to kind of see multiple generations of automation in warehouses, are you guys kind of, it's almost like a brownfield integration of different like islands, essentially? I assume you guys are seeing that more and more from old warehouses to, greenfields.
Yeah, we see it in some places where there's movement. Warehousing, there's been a lot of conversation about doing automation, and there's a few players that are really stepping into it well. I would say there's other players that will probably need to catch up and work through those brownfields. And I don't know if you'd agree with that, John, but that's what I see.
Yeah, no, it's way. I always enjoy going in to see. I mean, I started my professional career at Dematic, and so Dematic has gone through a color change in what they look at for their conveyor. So I always like to see like the old Dematic green, the new Dematic green, then Dematic gray or something like that, right? And I'm sure all companies have different color and styling changes, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch from all the other providers out there. So to me, that's kind of what I refer to as like the controls that are different, to kind of interact with them. And I actually just was at an old facility a moment ago, and the PLCs they're using have like these giant almost switches on them that I just hadn't seen because it's a 30-year-old facility, or it's a 40-year-old facility, right? And I'm used to a PLC a much more basic like on-off safety switch. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen those adaptations too. And I guess what I'll say is a lot of people still trust the tried and true, not a 30-year-old one. But there's different levels of reliability when you get into things, and some things the fundamentals work well in a lot of applications. So knowing those and when to apply them work well. And then trying to get those to talk to some of the newer technologies that help you adapt to the fundamentals. And the older technologies are very based on things being repeated in the same way often. And where you're seeing being bridged by some of the new technologies is we can be adaptive. And I think that's where your guys' system comes into place, is I can now take in this scenario that is different. Like you said at the beginning, John, where if you brought a single SKU pallet in that was always palletized the same, you want to destack it all day, every day, probably don't even need cameras sometimes if the boxes are the same.
Sure. So
that's been going for a long time, trusted on a PLC to work well. If you move into a mixed pallet, mixed SKU or rainbow pallet, you start getting this mix coming in that's different every time with different heights, and you have to adapt to all the different scenarios, labels on pallets. man, that system would fall on its face if it
Yeah.
didn't have something like the +1 system to take in that data, adjust that data, and adapt it to a robot path. So
Yeah, and what we found interesting is, a lot of folks still have plenty of single SKU pallets being moved and depalletized, right? Right now we're using that a lot, but a lot of folks will end up using a depal system from us, not only to use, on single SKU depal, but also to make that specific depal cell more flexible. So now it can do a rainbow pallet, now it can do a mixed SKU pallet. You can have slip sheets on there, things like that. So essentially, again, you're taking the same depalletizing area and you're making that one area more flexible.
Yeah, I think people are looking at how can I better utilize my automation if I don't have, if through one SKU I don't have enough of an ROI to justify automation, how can I use it for multi-SKU or multiple product lines to come through? It's going to handle these single SKU ones and handle those, then I'm going to send mixed SKUs into it, and I'm going to keep this thing, the uptime very high on this and the utilization of my capital high. And now my ROI becomes justified.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm hearing you guys talk and I'm thinking like, wait until the humanoids really get in the warehouse.
I told you I wasn't going to go there with humanoids in mind, but probably just bump the rankings on this thing just because we said it.
Yeah, season 3, Lisa, season 3. Yeah.
All right. So last question. This one is for both of you. If you could give advice to end users about where to get started or continue their automation journey, what would you offer?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in with this. We, see a lot of folks, and this plays into Ryan's point. He just mentioned about either tying into systems in the warehouse or potentially even not tying in. We're seeing a lot of folks that are saying, ought to help automate my process, but don't talk to my WMS, right? And so it's orient the labels a certain way, and then kind of continue into the legacy system. So we see a lot of those operations today in a lot of brownfield sites. But then when folks are coming to +1 and they say, all right, well, I've done this first level automation, we're now kind of expanding this to, not only this site, but multiple sites, but now help me kind of up and downstream. And of course, that is as soon as that happens, Ryan's the first one we call because we say, that's great. We're happy to help you with these island automations. But guess what? That is not +1 specialty. And nor do we, want to pretend to be that, right? There are other folks out there that have been doing it for a long time. And so, kind of going back to your question, Lisa, which is, how do you continue, right? If you're at that stage where you're saying, I've automated this island, I'm ready to go on this piece, but I'm ready to, either connect or maybe automate another island, right? And start to kind of look at a holistic picture of it. I think, Ryan, and integration companies like Mission are, the best bet out there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it started with conversation on what you're looking for. Brownfield, greenfield, scaling, deployments, multiple singles. It's really just getting to what you're looking to do. What do you want to start with? What can your team handle from an implementation standpoint? What's realistic? And then what's your vision? Is this, do you have 3-year, I want it to go here in 3 years? Well, let's set it up this way right now so you don't bottleneck yourself here or cut yourself off here. Or sometimes we'll go into the conversation. It's like, over the next year, I would really focus on, moving out of paper and getting an MES and some tracking within your facility and upgrading some of these systems. That's going to set you up long-term for depalletized induction. And then it's going to move into how do I do my order fulfillment and how do I do this, maybe a closed AMR field? How do I start to move in those directions? Because I see it, I want it, I don't know how to get there, and realizing that not everyone usually makes that full leap all at once.
Yep.
And there's a team that helps them get there and technical skills that you build along the way. So I would say get started first, start with something, talk with an expert on where that spot to start should be. So you don't end up creating an island that's really hard to get around.
Sure.
For the next island. So
don't create an anchor that you basically can never pick back up.
yeah. Floating islands.
Yeah.
Yes. So just a lot on the prep side is really, there's no such thing as too much prep, I would think.
And I will say on that too, Lisa, I mean, people are building out strong teams and they know what they're looking for. So there's times where it's prep and some coaching. Let's get started and walk through some of this. Use the experts to work your way through. And then there's times where like, I need this, I know what I need, and I need it relatively quickly because peak season's coming up. Can you have it put in place? And that's also a good solution, really. So there may be someone that knows what their problem is. They've identified it well and done their homework, and they know what they're looking for. So that's another spot where those just move quick and get it done.
Okay. I did find the video. I have a couple announcements, but I want to show this video before because this is just killing me. All right. And if you guys want to talk over this and kind of explain some stuff,
Do you want to spotlight
but like
the
I
video,
said,
Lisa?
oh yes.
Yep.
Thank you for calling that out.
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. Here's yours truly.
Yeah, I'll say that, the funny part about doing an example like this, I noticed it before, I was at +1, but again, the robot can just kind of come up to where the vision system lies. And so as long as the boxes are somewhere within, that area, right, in the field of view, then we can identify where it can go. And so the preciseness of that robot doesn't need to be the exact same thing every single time. I don't know how the locus wheels are, but it's like whether you have like a mecanum wheel or like a type of caster where essentially you're off by, like you were saying, right, before like an inch or something like that. That's perfectly okay with the vision system because we can just see where the items are, identify the X, Y, or ZY locations, and then create that center pick point.
Great.
All right.
And while I pull this up, are there any questions from our audience today? Okay. All right. Well, if you think of anything in the next couple minutes, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Gentlemen, this has been really insightful, so I appreciate your time and being here with us today. As a reminder for everybody, you'll receive a copy of this webinar with the recording. And then also, if this is your first time joining us, this next screen is advertising our next webinar. So if you like what you heard today, please join us next month. John is going to be back with us again, and we're going to be talking about what we call the $60,000 minute and the downtime, the price tag on the hidden downtime. This QR code will take you to our homepage for the second season of the webinar, so you can see everything we got coming up. As I speakers, I fill in that information. So, but the registration links are always live once they come online. And let me see. I think that is it. We've wrapped up all our trade shows for this year. So if anyone wants to reach out to us, I invite you to. Here's our information. If you'd like to reach out to Ryan on LinkedIn, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to introduce you as well. Same with John. And I think that is it. So if there are any questions just going forward, happy to answer those after we leave here today. So thanks so much, everyone. And we'll either see you on the road or the next webinar. Oh, one comment I wanted to make about the next webinar. We did have to change a date. As you know, we usually do the 4th Wednesday of the month, but the next 4th Wednesday falls around Thanksgiving and then Christmas. So we did and made this one on December 3rd. So anyway, that is all I have for you today. Thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.